Nobody's perfect. If you would open your Bibles, please, to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to be continuing our sub-series, if you will, on ABC lessons. You ever had somebody say, well, how you doing? Well, I'm blessed. Or, hey, it's good to see y'all. I'm blessed to be here. And this morning, I hope you are all feeling the same with me, that we feel blessed to be here together to worship God. I want you to think about the conditions under which you would consider your best life. A life in which you are truly blessed. And so, let's define blessed. There are, just like in English, there are a couple of Greek words that we translate as blessed. There is eulogia, noun, adjective, and verb. Good speaking, blessing, praise, celebration, invocation of good, benediction. Or the adjective, worthy of praise or blessing, blessed. And if we are using this in the verb, it means to speak well of, to bless. And as you can kind of guess, this is where we get our word eulogy. Our Bible reading this morning used this word. But in our text, there's a different word, and that word is makarios. The verb is to pronounce happy, and our text uses the adjective happy or blessed. So keeping this in mind and thinking about the conditions of your life in which you would consider it your best blessed life, let's read Matthew 5, 2 through 12. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you, persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad. For your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Are those the conditions you thought of as your best blessed life? Now, we know this passage as the Beatitudes, and beatitude comes from the Latin word beatitudo, which is the rendering of the Greek, you guessed it, makarios, happy. And some translations have happy in place of blessed. Is this the list of people that you consider happy or blessed? The word literally means an inner joy that is untouchable by the world. An inner joy untouchable by the world. You know, human happiness so often is dependent on circumstances. Depending on the circumstances, we consider ourselves happy or blessed or unhappy. And we really have no control over those things. But true happiness, true blessed happiness is really a choice. Despite the circumstances, you choose to be happy or not. And probably when we think of the happy or the blessed person, we think more along the lines of the Psalm 1 individual. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of waters that brings forth its fruit in its season. His leaf also does not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Now that sounds a little more right, doesn't it? The blessed man, his leaf is always in season, and his fruit doesn't rot, and it produces good and all of that. That's a blessed guy. Well, if we look at the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, we find that the blessed person of Psalm 1 is the Makarios, happy, blessed person. That is the same term that's used in Jesus in Matthew 5, 3 through 11, and he uses it 9 times to describe the righteous man, the blessed man, the happy man with whom God is pleased. You know what's interesting in these verses here in Matthew 5? Blessed. It's always plural. Maybe that suggests to us the fullness of the happiness that the godly person has. Here we see Jesus' teaching on authentic righteousness and true happiness. His approach to the godly life is absolutely opposed to the view of culture today. Talk about countercultural. Jesus was and is to come forevermore to be countercultural. So let's look at what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about happiness from his ideal viewpoint. The conditions that Jesus presents here of the blessed are those which his hearers have predominantly and usually and always really considered to be curses. Blessed are those who mourn. The Beatitudes are paradoxes. They're paradoxes in that they declare the man who, from the ordinary point of view, and perhaps even his own point of view, seems to be most unfortunate. They present that guy as being truly blessed, as being well off. Now, generally, people that we consider to be blessed are well off, aren't they? Poor in spirit, hungering and thirsting, mourning, persecuted. We don't consider that very well off, do we? Jesus does. These Beatitudes are flat contradictions of the common worldview. And they demonstrate themselves in actual practice in being unquestionably true. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Now, the word for poor is used of those who are destitute and dependent on others. Being spiritually poverty-stricken means that one recognizes that his own resources are insufficient to meet his spiritual needs. The psalmist wrote that the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. Psalm 51 and 17. Being poor in spirit is the opposite of being filled with pride and self-righteousness. It's being humble in spirit. And this comes first on the Lord's list of Beatitudes, because without this one, we can't accept the attitudes expressed in the rest of the list. Like, blessed are those who mourn. And this word, the word for mourn here, is perhaps the strongest and most severe of several Greek words that express grief or sorrow. It's often used to express the grief experienced by a person who's lost a loved one. And this kind of sorrow is the sorrow that grips a person and will not let you go. It's often demonstrated in weeping and lamentations. Well, that's a word we really need to get back to using and understanding and practicing, really. Lamentations, lamenting. But that's a different lesson. Now, it is doubtful that Jesus is talking about the loss of a loved one here. Apparently, this background for this particular beatitude is Isaiah 61 and 2, which foretells of the Messiah coming and that he would comfort all who mourn. And mourners in ancient Israel were troubled over the sins of the people, of the nation, and the subsequent judgment from God. They were distraught as they thought of wicked Gentile nations triumphing over the Lord's people. I mean, these are the chosen people of God. And here are these Gentiles, these wicked Gentiles triumphing over God the way they thought. One such example is Jeremiah, who wept over Jerusalem. In Jeremiah, 9 and 1 and 18 and 13 and 17 and 14 and 17. Jesus also wept over Jerusalem. In Lamentations, which was most likely written by Jeremiah, he sorrowed because Jerusalem, God's chosen city, was destroyed as punishment for her sin. Righteous mourners sorrow over their own sin, and probably a little bit of the sin of others, but mainly their own sin. That is what they're mourning over. We see that in Psalm 51, 1 through 4, 7 through 12. And it's only when one realizes that his sins really break God's heart that he is fit for conversion. Paul said that godly sorrow brings repentance that leads to salvation. 2 Corinthians 7 and 10. Then blessed are the meek. Now this is an interesting word. It's also translated gentle, and it basically means mild or soft. Not something we really regard as good, as a good characteristic, do we? But meekness is not weakness. Now, there is gentleness in this word, but behind this gentleness, there is the strength of steel. It's a strength under control. Often it's used in training horses, bringing all of that raw power under the control of bit and bridle. And, we have the admonition to bridle the tongue. And sometimes we're really good about that, but we forget that our face has subtitles. Well, the meek person has the subtitles under control too. The English word meek often depicts a less than honorable, weak, spineless individual. And that's not the meaning of the word in classical Greek. It represented one of the great ethics of the Greek culture. And one scholar describes the dilemma that the translator has with this word. He said that no one English word will translate it. Although perhaps the word gentle comes nearest to it. And what bliss there is in the man who is always angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time, who has every instinct, impulse, and passion under control. Because he himself is under God's control. He's put himself there. The one who has the humility to realize that he has his own ignorance and his own weakness. A man like that, well, he's king among men. And it's true, we often think of those meek people as weak people. But the meek person then is the one who gets angry at the right things at the right time. He's the kind of person who is more concerned about injustices to others, especially the weaker ones, than about personal insults. It is a fact in history that it has always been the men with this gift of meekness, of self-control, the men with their passions and instincts and impulses under discipline. These men are the ones who have been great. Now think of people that you consider strong, spiritually even. Strong spiritually. Would you think of them as being weak? How about Moses and Jesus? Would you consider them weak? Moses was very meek above all men, which were upon the face of the earth. Numbers 12:3. And Jesus, in describing himself, said that he was meek or gentle and humble in heart. Matthew 11:29. I don't consider either of those two men to be weak. They filled their God-given roles with servant attitudes and with wisdom and with power. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. When you think about it, probably hunger and thirst are perhaps the strongest and most frequent physical desires that human beings have. I mean, it's breakfast and I'm already thinking about lunch. And about the time I decide what we're going to have for lunch or whatever, I'm thinking about supper. We've got pretty much instant access to food and drink. And the other day I was in the office and I could tell things were not right. I did not feel right. I could tell that I was not being my sweet self. And then it dawned on me, well, I hadn't eaten anything. And the bliss and joy and wonderful experience it was to just pull out my phone and order food, and here in about 20 minutes, there it is at the door. And then I got back to being my sweet self. Pretty much instant access. You drive to the drive-thru, and within 5 minutes, you got a meal. Order ahead. So for us, that intense hunger and thirst are kind of foreign to people of our modern Western world. You really have to go to basically third world countries to really, or I guess communist countries too, to really experience that. But Jesus knew what it was like to hunger, having fasted for 40 days and nights in the wilderness. And here Jesus applied this idea of hungering and thirsting to spiritual desire. He used that qualifying phrase, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. It's imagery that has its background in the Psalms. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? Psalms 42, 1 and 2. And sometimes it's translated, as the deer thirsts for the water, so my soul thirsts for you. It's stronger than that. As the deer pants for the water. That's how we need to hunger and thirst for righteousness. O God, you are my God. I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. Psalm 63 and 1. Spiritual hunger and thirst are found throughout the Old Testament. Isaiah 53, 1 and 2 talks of coming and thirsting for water. Come and have it freely. That's also repeated in Revelation. At the well of Jacob, Jesus was tired and thirsty and hungry, and his disciples went into the city to get food. And when they returned, they were astonished that Jesus evidently wasn't hungry anymore. He didn't need to eat. He refused to eat. He said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. And my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his word. John 4, 32 and 34. Now this beatitude, at least in part, needs to be defined a little bit by righteousness. Leon Morris said, it has to do with moral uprightness, this righteousness. He wrote, every now and then, everyone does what's right. Sometimes everybody does what's right. But Jesus is pointing his hearers not to occasional acts, but to a passionate concern for the right. Now, the construction here in this verse suggests that Jesus' disciples should desire righteousness that has a broad entirety to it. Righteousness, as defined as right living before God, is not an optional spiritual supplement, but a spiritual necessity. No disciple of Christ can excuse themselves from seeking righteousness. They've got to yearn for it for every part of it. Blessed are the merciful. It's from a word that could be translated sympathetic. And the related term mercy denotes sympathy that is felt and manifested in actions toward others. One who has mercy upon another seeks his best interest by being charitable toward him. Now, it's different than just feeling sorry for somebody. This word requires positive action to be taken to aid a person. And Jesus' teaching on mercy went against the grim it went against the grain. He's grinding gears here. This is against the typical lifestyle of the New Testament world, the Roman world. They despised pity. And the Romans had a reputation for viewing pity as a disease of the soul. They considered mercy to be a sign of weakness, and they despised it above all human frailties. They glorified manliness. Boy, they wouldn't have a chance today. Talk about toxic masculinity. They'd be in trouble. To them, mercy demonstrated a lack of manliness. The Jewish religious leaders of Jesus' day were most often devoid of mercy. They were self-righteous, arrogant, proud, and judgmental. They thought they had the answer to every theological question. But they had no mercy for those that were suffering. They viewed suffering as punishment from God for sin. You remember Gamaliel, Paul's teacher? He's quoted in the Talmud as having said, "Whoever is merciful to others, mercy is shown to him by heaven. While he who is not merciful to others, mercy is not shown to him by heaven." Now, unlike many of his contemporaries, Gamaliel had a more correct view of mercy. Mercy is one of the great characteristics of both God and Christ. And why not? They're both God. Jesus identified mercy as one of the weightier provisions of the law that the teachers were neglecting. The beatitude here reflects what is written in Proverbs 14 and 21. Most blessed is he who is merciful to the poor. Blessed are the pure in heart. There are some 27 times that the word for pure appears in the New Testament. Now, the New American Standard Bible usually translates it as either pure or clean. Heart refers to the center of one's inner self, the feeling, the thinking, the will of a person, the heart of a person. And this beatitude speaks of that inner purity of followers of Christ in contrast to that outward ritual cleansing that was practiced by the scribes and Pharisees. A pure heart is the source and base of all right living. Without it, the right actions are turned into meaningless rituals. A pure heart produces external purity. A pure heart describes a person whose single-minded loyalty is to God and that it has affected every area of his life. Blessed are the peacemakers. Now, the term behind peacemaker, it only appears here. Only here in the New Testament do we have this particular word. Now, one scholar said that the word describes an attitude which is opposite that of the whisperer, the meddler, the busybody, the tattler, and the mischief maker. Now, forms of this Greek word for peace are used more than 90 times in the New Testament. They appear in almost every book. And what does that tell you about how God the Father and Jesus the Son feels about our relationship toward one another? The Hebrew word for peace, shalom, it means more than just the absence of conflict. It includes desiring positive good for others, to effectively set the word in its cultural context. We need to be mindful of that Pax Romana, the Roman peace that you probably remember, well, if you're old enough, you remember talking about in history class. I'm not sure they even teach it anymore. But by military superiority, the Romans had put an end to all these small wars between these competing client states. They'd rid the Mediterranean Sea of pirates, and they had greatly diminished the highwaymen on land. Except for the frontiers of the empire, there really wasn't war. But peace, in the Hebrew sense, shalom, harmonious cooperation aimed at the welfare of all. Well, that's not going to be established by the Roman legions. It's been suggested that this particular beatitude is directed against those who are zealots. Followers of Jesus are to do more than just think and talk and wish and hope for peace. The Lord did not say, "Blessed are those who love peace," or "Blessed are those who hope for peace." He invited His disciples to bring about peace where it does not exist. Doesn't make a promise to those who simply avoid conflict. Instead, true happiness comes from those who face their differences and overcome them. What this beatitude demands is not passive acceptance of things because of the hardship or trouble maybe of doing anything about them, but the active facing of things and the trying to make peace, even when the way to peace, as it most often does, involves a little bit of struggle and maybe some big struggle. Actively pursue peace. Now, of course, some of that is not dependent upon you, but as much as is your part, be a peacemaker. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Now, in these final verses here, the paradoxes of the Beatitudes reach a climax. I mean, they really come out. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness." Now, the word for persecute means chasing, driving away, or pursuing. They're coming after us because we're righteous. It suggests physical abuse, harassment, and other forms of persecution. It also includes insults and slander. And when we look at Luke 6:22, there's a little bit more detail. "Blessed are you when men hate you and ostracize you and insult you and scorn your name as evil." And the word here for insult, it involves a serious insult. It could be translated revile or reproach. And literally, it means hurl insults in one's teeth. And in the face of such persecution, Jesus told his followers, "Rejoice and be glad." Rejoice and be glad that people are insulting me, that they're chasing after me, that they're harassing me, that they are physically hurting me. Yeah. Rejoicing in the face of persecution seems radical and idealistic to present-day disciples. That's not the way it was with the early church. After being flogged, the apostles left the Sanhedrin, Acts 5, 40 and 41, rejoicing that they had been considered worthy to suffer shame for His name. They went away rejoicing. Most of the time we see people going away rejoicing that they've been saved, that they have obeyed the gospel. Here we see apostles rejoicing on their way because they were persecuted for Jesus' name. A paradox. So how is one blessed in these Beatitudes by having these qualities within them? Well, if we look at the text, we see that the poor in spirit have the kingdom of heaven. Those that mourn are comforted. The meek inherit the earth. Those that hunger and thirst will be filled. They'll be satisfied. The merciful receive mercy. The pure in heart will see God. The peacemakers shall be called sons of God. And the persecuted, they get the kingdom of heaven. And their reward is great in heaven. And you know what's sad? We Americans, we have more to make life easy than any people who've ever lived. Yet at the same time, we have more suicides, more divorces, more people in jail, more mental illness, more generally unhappy people than anybody. For many, life is a grim, desperate, unhappy affair. Happiness essentially comes from inside of us. A truly happy person is one who lives a controlled and balanced life. In other words, true happiness comes from being in a right relationship with God and with the people of God around us. There are four important truths pointed out regarding the Beatitudes, and you'll catch another mistake that did not save. Again, I apologize. Number one, they are a description of how every Christian should live. Number two, they are intended to be completely absorbed by every Christian. Number three, they are not what we would call natural tendencies. The Beatitudes challenge us to do the opposite of what probably comes naturally. And number 4, they call upon us to live above the world and its lust and to be truly different and distinctive from those around us. They call us again to come out and be separate, because these are the blessed people. Very different from what the world looks at as those blessed. Are you blessed? You experiencing these characteristics, qualities in your life? Some of us are, some of us are not. Some of us may want to look at the direction of our life in the characteristics of these Beatitudes that we are not experiencing. The invitation of Jesus is to come to Him, all who labor and are weary and heavy laden, and He'll give you rest. His burden is easy, His yoke is light. No matter how heavy the world makes it for us, Jesus' yoke and burden is easy and light. And if you're subject to the invitation of the Lord in any way, we'll pray for you and we'll pray with you if you'll come as together we stand and sing.